Good morning. This is a real photo. Sometimes people think it's from a movie or a film. This is a photo of Carlos McIntosh. He was just 19 years old and he was shot in downtown Toronto. This is the summer of 2005. Over 60 young men like him lost their lives or were victims to shootings in that summer. It's a real tragic set of events that were really the context in which Nia Center was born. And sometimes it's difficult to start our story here, but it's a really important part of the context and the environment in which Nia Center was born in. So if I'm going to tell you the story of how we started, how we get from a seed to blossom, how we create a space, how we create a legacy, I have to tell you about the environment and the context that we started in. And we started with the Youth Challenge Fund. After that summer of the gun, where a number of young people lost their lives, the government said, okay, we have to do something. And so they invested $45 million into a one-time fund. And that fund was focused on investing in priority neighborhoods, so neighborhoods like Jane and Finch, Malvern, Lawrence Heights, bringing infrastructure, so physical spaces where young people could go after school, on the weekends, bringing mentorship programs into communities where young people needed it most. And the Youth Challenge Fund was quite special in that it was a short-time fund, and so it was quite, trying to be aggressive in its investments. And I, at the time, 2007, watch these cringy photos, was a university student at York. And I was, working in a community that was right next to Jane and Finch. And I was starting in sort of my community work and activism, and I was part of starting a girls group. So that's the photo on the left, is me, the young girls, the one I'm sitting on. But we started a girls group called Sisters with Integrity, Navigating Greatness. We got a grant from the Youth Challenge Fund, and it was a really transformative part of my journey to see myself early on reflecting on and supporting young people and helping them see themselves getting into university and taking a new path. And so that led to me getting an internship with the fund. So I joined the team in 2008. And on my first day at the fund, my boss came to me at like 5 o'clock and was like, can you stay for this meeting? We have a group of artists coming in. And I was like, okay. It actually became the norm. All of our meetings were at 5 o'clock because that's when young people were free. But it was a group of artists who were thinking about what it would look like to have a Black art center in the city. We have this huge population of young creatives, they're vibrant, but they don't have a regular place to go to get that sort of development and mentorship. And so they began to dream, what would this art center do? Who would staff it? Who would come to it? Where would it be in the city? And it really resonated with me because, at one point I was a young person who wanted to be creative. How many of us had early dreams of being artists or musicians or anything? Yeah. Early dreams of being creative, and yet how many of you also had parents that were supportive of said dreams? Raise of hands? Okay, a few. I love that for you. Ish. Yeah. That wasn't me. My parents were definitely like, Alica, go to school, get a regular degree, get a job, and then you can do what you want. You can want to be a creative, you want to be a fashion designer, great. After all of that. So it was really, a beautiful dream to me to see Nia Center start its work, go out into communities, bring, film photography out into Lawrence Heights, bring theater workshops out into Malvern, bring these young creatives who had a hunger and a drive to be creative and give them the tools and resources to be able to perform and develop their skill sets and showcase their work and tell them this is viable. This is a viable career. You can do this. This is Whitney French here in this corner, a young Whitney French. She went on to publish anthologies. She has her own printing press now. But in those days, oftentimes as children of immigrants, this is not an option, right? You need to be a lawyer. You need to be a doctor. And so Nia Center was really a part of seeding those young people's dreams and saying, yes, this is a career that you can pursue. But the thing that was missing was still the space. Where were they going to meet? We know that space and place grounds us, it affirms us, it gives us a regular destination to go to. Think of your regular coffee shop. You go there every morning, you feel a sense of connection to that barista, even though you don't really know her, you're going in there and get what you need. So we knew that space was an important part of grounding the artistic community in Toronto. And so the team in 2014 was able to locate the future home of Nia Center for the Arts. 524 Oakwood Avenue, just south of Eglinton West in Little Jamaica, a historically, African and Caribbean neighborhood. And the building was hideous. It was an old public health facility, most recently used for things like doctor's visits, picking up condoms, nurses, like little carpets, it was hideous. And I'll show you some early photos. They tried to zhuzh it up, make it feel a bit more like an art center, put up some artwork, but it was a lot of little rooms, low ceilings, hideous. But they brought in the community, right? They started to test out bringing ideas in, doing workshops, bringing young people together, because it was a space, and they wanted people to start coming back to Little Jamaica, a place where we had long had this history of gathering. But in about, 2017, I got the call that they had started the renovation project. The goal was to renovate this 14,000 square foot facility, 3 floors. They had started it, and it kind of fell off. They were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. They had $1 million on the table. They had the building, but little else. Tenants had pulled out, funders were pulling out. Just folks weren't yet buying into this vision of how they were going to make this facility into a destination for professional arts. And so in 2017, I too was at a bit of a crossroads. This is a photo from a very difficult town hall that I did as the co-chair of Pride Toronto. Shout out Pride. And they called me up and they said, Alica, we don't have money, we can't pay you, but we have this building, we have this dream, can you come on board and help us get it back on track? And I too was thinking, okay, I just finished this contract, I was working at a hospital in communications, and was like, okay, what am I doing next? What's my next sort of job here? I've always wanted to be in the arts, amazing, but is this the opportunity? Do I want to take on the risk of this project? And so, I ask you folks, how many of you have had to make that difficult choice between a stable career or your dreams, your passion or something practical, What did you choose? I chose the dream. It was pretty risky at that time, and I was trying to look for photos of what would represent the following 3 years, and literally my phone is empty in that period. I stopped taking photos, I stopped going out. It was just, relentless work. I had never worked that hard before. I had never written grants. I had never talked to people in construction before. I had never pitched funders. I had never hired staff. I hadn't done any of it, starting from scratch. But after about, 2.5 years, we were in a place where we could break ground. We had raised, at that point, I think it was about $5 million. It was in the midst of the pandemic, so everyone was masked up, but we wanted to celebrate this important milestone of being at the point where we were going to renovate and gut this facility, and we did. We tore it up. Everything, the roof just kept about 3 walls to standing during the entire time. And I was saying as I was reflecting on, this theme that we often get obsessed with the blossom, right? The blossom is the highlight reel. It's the outcome, it's the thing we post on Instagram, it's the thing we talk about, but so much of the work is between the bud to the blossom. And it's oftentimes not things that we can take photos of, or even sometimes talk about, right? It's the staying up late, it's the challenging yourself to do something different. For me, it was learning to say no to all the fun things that were being thrown our way, but didn't contribute to this project itself, right? It was about challenging myself to have difficult conversations. It was about being relentless in being inspired by hearing no. All right, on to the next one. We're going to keep going. And so much of that is just internal, right? So much of the bud, that transformation that's happening is happening inside. We don't see really until it manifests. And so it's hard to take photos, but I think that's a really important part of everyone's journey, is being able to figure out what is going to be that internal transformation. What's taking you from the bud to the blossom? And so fast forward 3 difficult years. We broke ground in the midst of construction, so that means that the price of steel went up, all of our supplies were delayed. Of course, you're working on a construction project, so you've seen the shows. This wall behind it is something scary, and we didn't realize it was there, so now that thing can't be done anymore. But we worked together, we were relentless, we raised more money, and we went from this to this. We built Canada's first professional, multidisciplinary Black Arts Centre. We renovated 14,000 square feet, so all those little ugly rooms in the beginning became that big performance space. We dug out all of the basement to create a digital media lab, as well as our youth hub. We renovated our upstairs to create an event space. And now we have all these dynamic spaces to do all the things we've dreamed about. Hosting artist talks, that's Gordon Shadrack and Brandon Bahoji, visual artists who have both been involved in our programming. We partner to create ceramic workshops, teaching artists new skills, new disciplines and mediums. Of course, working with youth is at the heart of our existence, and so these are all new and emerging voices in theater. So our center stage program brought them together and helped them to develop monologues and theatrical pieces that they then performed for our community. And then, we can do community programming. We had a Met Gala event this year, so we played on the theme of the Met Gala, which was about Black dandyism. Everyone showed out, was dressed to the nines. It was amazing. From theater to comedy nights, we use this space to really seed what's possible for the next generation. We know how important it is for people to have a sense of connection and belonging. And in a city where the cost of everything is going up and spaces are disappearing, we want to ensure that people have a place that they can go where they feel like they belong. They have a place that they can go where they feel like they can connect with someone who understands their experience. They have a place that they can go where they can challenge themselves and do something new. And we do that for artists, for young people, and our general community. And so really we know that, from our early beginnings, from that catalyst, it's a reality. We still have violence in our communities. We're still grappling with the ravages of poverty in our communities. But we're also, every day, I see young people walk through our doors who are confident. I see young people making connections with our team, connections with each other, putting their phones down to actually learn new skills. And I see them walk through that door and say, Alica, actually this year I'm going to be applying for university. And it moves me because I know that this is a seed we're planting in our community. This is a future leader. I see artists who are creating work that shifts the narrative of what it means to be a Black Canadian. And they're creating work that one day is going to end up in institutions that form a legacy of what it means to reflect our experiences and shift that both in media and in the arts sector. And so we go from seed to blossom, but we know that at the end of the day, from that blossom creates more seeds. We want to create a garden, right? And so each and every day I'm inspired by the work that we're doing to seed that garden in the young people and the creatives and the community members that we work with. And I'm grateful to do this work. Thank you.
Go there. There you go. All right. That was fantastic. And what we'd like to do now is give everyone about 2 to 3